This is the Way Podcast.
The militias needed to have a heads up that I was coming.
I personally think they didn't, like in chess.
So that's how deep the addiction goes.
I've been incarcerated most of my life.
Having a conversation with
or they've been given no option, either join or die.
Snipers, and it was a military.
That film is famously visually gorgeous.
If you want to know more about the Way Podcast, go to podcasttheway.com.
Also on FM 91.7, WHUS Stores at the top of the hour. I'm your host, Bill Trofesky, and for more, go to podcasttheway.com. So today, I'm sitting with the National Organizing Director for Beyond Plastics, Alexis Goldsmith. How are you doing today, Alexis?
I'm doing great, Bill. Thanks for having me on the show. Thanks
for coming out. Was that introduction accurate?
Yeah, I would say that our mission is to end plastic pollution everywhere. It's a very David and Goliath issue, but it's possible.
I know it's a big one. You guys, where are you located? Just throughout the U.S.? You have organizations here and there?
We are based out of Bennington College in Bennington, Vermont, but we're very mobile as a small organization. We can kind of just jump in anywhere.
It's good to hear. What made you even want to get started and join this organization?
Well, I personally, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, of course, plastic pollution is a crisis. I'm still a young person, but, in just one generation, we've produced more plastics. Okay, let me back up here. What made me want to join Beyond Plastics? I was actually recruited for Beyond Plastics. I'm a community organizer where I live in Troy, New York. We're fighting a number of regional environmental issues that have to do with the waste, like waste disposal, and its environmental justice impacts on the community here. So there's a hazardous waste incinerator, there's a construction and debris landfill, there's a cement plant that wants to burn millions of tires. And of course, all of these facilities are in residential neighborhoods. 2 of them are right next to public schools. 1 of them's next to a public housing complex. And so we've been organizing against these facilities that deal with waste once it has become waste. So it's the downstream effects of waste. But I've started to realize that we can't deal with this problem until we just stop making the waste in the first place. And so I was recruited by our organization president, who's the former EPA administrator for Region 2, which includes New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and several other locales. And she's the president of Beyond Plastics, and she lives in the area, and she had been organizing with us, and she asked me to come on to Beyond Plastics. So I was thrilled to jump at the chance to be a professional organizer.
Oh, I bet. She used to work under Obama's administration, right?
She did. She was the EPA administrator for Region 2 for 8 years. And she likes to tell the story about how she knew when her last day on the job was going to be, of course, because there was a new incoming president. So she had thought about what she wanted to do and realized that there wasn't a lot of work being done or enough work being done to address the plastic pollution crisis, which is also the climate crisis. And so she started Beyond Plastics.
I feel like, well, you said it earlier, you're part of the newer generation, such as myself, and we're very towards environmental change and targeting climate change as one of our biggest issues, which is great. Mm-hmm. And again, climate change is such a big issue. So of all the problems from car pollution to all that stuff, what made you want to target plastic in particular?
Well, plastic is a major contributor to climate change. I've also been a community reporter for 2 years, and I've done a lot focusing on petrochemical build out and how that is driving the climate crisis. And basically, oil and gas is declining as the world starts to recognize and deal with the climate crisis. And more and more people want green energy, clean energy, and that's causing market problems for the petrochemical industry. So what they've been doing is trying to shift into plastics by making plastic in what's called an ethane cracker. So plastic is actually a byproduct of fracking, and it's made with natural gas liquids called ethane. And the ethane is superheated in an ethane cracker, which cracks it into this monomer called ethylene. And then the ethylene can be strung together to create polyethylene. And I don't think that there's enough attention when we talk about the climate crisis on plastic, because if plastic itself was a country, it would be the 5th largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. And plastic releases greenhouse gases at every stage of its life cycle. And further, oil and gas companies are turning to plastic to prolong our dependence on fossil fuels. They're looking toward plastic to save the petrochemical industry, or at least delay its collapse for as long as possible. And so what they're doing is planning to build up to 9 new ethane crackers. As I mentioned earlier, the ethane cracker where they make the plastic, up to 9 new ethane crackers in the Marcellus Shale Basin and the Utica Shale Basin in the Ohio River Valley area. And each one of these ethane crackers could produce 1.8 million tons of virgin plastic every year. So that's an exponential increase in the amount of plastic that we're already making. So the plastic crisis is the climate crisis. I mean, that's just all there is to it. Sorry, I really got down a rabbit hole with that one.
No, that's great. And I feel like everything's been getting better. Like we're slowly getting more green and green. But if that comes into effect, that's literally making the plastic issue worse.
Yeah, I don't know how much more green we're getting, to be honest. There's a lot of greenwashing.
What's that? Like fake being green? Like, oh, we're green, but we're not really green?
Yeah, totally. Let me give you an example. So Amazon, right? Largest e-commerce market shareholder in the country. They hold something like over a third of the e-commerce market in the US. Amazon in 2019 pledged to go carbon free by 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Climate Accord. And they have released sustainability reports where they've revealed what their massive carbon footprint is. In 2020, I think it was like 51.17 million metric tons of carbon that they emit. And you may have noticed if you ever order from Amazon that they no longer use cardboard boxes. They've switched to these flexible plastic mailers. And in their sustainability report, Amazon says that they have optimized their shipping containers to reduce weight, the weight of the packaging, the weight of the trucks, you know, when the trucks are loaded up, so that it saves on fossil fuels. So they don't mention that the new packaging is made of plastic, but plastic is very light. And so this is actually a really common argument in the industry, is that plastic reduces shipping weights and therefore reduces, you know, how much carbon it takes to ship something. But the problem with that argument is it doesn't take into account the life cycle emissions of plastic. The fact that plastic is a byproduct of fracking. Fracking releases tons and tons of methane, a super, super potent, 89 times more potent than carbon. It's a greenhouse gas. And fracking, you know, from extracting natural gas liquids in the ground, they transport them through pipelines usually, or they can do it by rail car and truck now. Then storage, then transporting them again to these cracking facilities, and then the plastic being transported to being made into packaging materials like what Amazon is using. Their plastic mailers, their air pillows, their bubble wrap, all that's made of plastic film that is not recyclable. Less than 4% of plastic film in the US is recycled. And Amazon made something like Oceana estimated over 450 million pounds of this plastic film that they used for their packaging in 1 year alone, in 2019 alone. And the plastic, when it's discarded, it either winds up in the environment, it winds up in a landfill, or it goes to an incinerator. And in an incinerator, obviously, it's going to release greenhouse gases. But in a landfill in the environment, as it breaks down into microplastics, it continues to release methane. So plastic really does release greenhouse gases at every stage of its life cycle. So my question is, does replacing cardboard packaging, which cardboard is infinitely recyclable and compostable, with plastic packaging that is not recyclable, does it really reduce your greenhouse gas footprint? And I would argue that is highly unlikely, but we don't really have a full picture of plastics of Amazon's plastic footprint because they don't release that in their sustainability report.
It doesn't even sound like a Band-Aid. It literally sounds like they're just making it worse. Because you said like it reduces the weight of their delivery trucks, but then you mentioned that the plastic has to get delivered to Amazon through that process, and the methane was, what was it, 98 times worse?
89 times.
89 got backwards. So yeah, it literally sounds like it's making it worse.
It is. Yeah, it absolutely is. Oceana, in their report on Amazon's plastic use, estimated that they used enough plastic air pillows alone in 2019 to circle the Earth 500 times. And if you consider that a third of all plastic that's made winds up in the environment, as estimated by the World Wildlife Foundation, then that's a pretty grim picture. And when you consider that plastic is not just a greenhouse gas emitter, but that it wreaks havoc on biodiversity. It's killed so many animals. I mean, 90% of seabirds are eating plastic. There's over 2,000 marine species that are known to eat plastic. And you hear stories of whales washing up on beaches with their stomachs full of this plastic. I think when people get in the mail, you know, a package they've ordered online and it comes in this lightweight plastic film mailer, they don't think that that is what's winding up in the ocean, but all too often it is.
Also, you said 4% is recyclable. Why? I like every plastic I have, I just throw in the recycle bin. I just assumed it was all recyclable. Why does Amazon pick this kind that's not recyclable, and why is so few recyclable?
Well, they say it's recyclable, but the problem is there's no market for recycled plastic film. And usually there's no facility in the area that can recycle it. And the other problem is you can't put plastic film in your curbside recycling. You have to drive to a designated pickup area to drop it off. And, you know, in my mind, that defeats the purpose of online shopping, which is like not having to leave your house. But Amazon, in their sustainability reports, in addition to claiming that this reduces their carbon by reducing their shipping weights, says that their mailers are recyclable, but it's just not true.
I feel like a lot of these corporations, they sort of say to improve on the environment, the people need to all come together and recycle and like do our own part. But you can tell me like the stat if you know it, but like isn't the large majority of this pollution going on just from the corporations? Like if they cut back, they could do like one or two of them cut back, they could do a lot more than all of us could ever do together.
You know, I saw a stat that 100 companies are responsible for 71% of the emissions.
That's what I think I remember hearing it.
Yeah. You're totally right. I mean, we can't recycle our way out of this problem, and we can't. Individual change is part of the puzzle, of course, Like we'll have to change our lifestyles. But we can't do that if we don't have any other option. I mean, when was the last time you went to a grocery store and were able to get everything you needed without purchasing single-use plastic? Everything comes packaged in plastic, or almost everything. And if you are able to get things that aren't packaged in plastic, that takes a certain amount of privilege in your life and a certain amount of access to things that not everybody has. So there really is no consumer choice when it comes to making better decisions for the environment. It's got to be on the companies, and if the companies won't do it, then the governments need to force them to through regulations.
Over here in Connecticut, they banned the plastic bags from grocery stores. And now, like, I went shopping yesterday. I keep forgetting the reusable bag, so I had to go back and forth like 10 times. But was that at least a positive step?
That's definitely a positive step. I mean, reducing single-use plastic is so important because 40% of the plastic, the virgin plastic that's produced, is for single use. So that means it's used, like less than an hour, and then it's thrown away, and it persists for centuries in the environment. So single-use plastic bags, straws, polystyrene takeout containers, coffee stirrers, those little coffee splash guards they give you at Starbucks, anything to reduce single-use plastic. It's going to get industry pushback, but it's a way to start dealing with the problem of the upstream problem instead of dealing with it at the end.
Gotcha. What's nuts too is I remember seeing, speaking of like grocery stores and whatnot, if I want to buy an orange, I'll go buy an orange. Maybe I'll put it in a plastic bag or something. But I remember seeing pre-peeled oranges in plastic containers for people that don't want to peel oranges. Like,
that's just nuts.
That's way too far in the opposite direction. I wouldn't even want it. It's probably dry by that point.
Yeah. So unnecessary. And yeah, it's just unnecessary.
I don't know. But you mentioned microplastics earlier.
Yeah.
And I heard a little bit about that. I actually stopped getting plastic water bottles because I think it was something like microplastic is in like 90% of us already and stuff, and we don't know what long-term effects they'll have. Yeah. But yeah, is there anything you can tell me about that?
Yeah. Well, do you get scared easily? Because there have been numerous studies confirming that we're eating, drinking, and breathing microplastics.
Breathing like in the air too? And COVID wasn't enough.
Well, I mean, let me tell you, the synthetic rubber is made out of plastic. So rubber tires that are made with synthetic rubber, they abrade. Is that a word? As they're going on the road, abrasion causes microplastic to come off of the tires, which we are then breathing in. So people who live next to highways, they have more pulmonary issues for a variety of reasons, but particulate matter in the air is definitely one of them. But as far as, other plastic that we're ingesting, it's ubiquitous in water now, unfortunately, because there's so much plastic in our oceans and in our waterways. And the plastic that's in there breaks down into microplastic. And water, there's no boundaries on water. There's no borders on it. It circulates all over the world. And it's been found in the Arctic. It's been found in remote mountains. It's been found in human feces. And now Italian researchers have found it on the fetal side of human placentas. And there was one study that estimates that the average person is ingesting a credit card's worth of plastic. That's 5 grams every week.
Actually, so you're born with it in you when you said the fetus part, and just like, I have my wallet next to me. Yeah, that whole card's worth. Wow. What do we know of any side effects yet? Obviously it can't be good.
I'm not a medical doctor and I haven't done a lot of research into this, but I would say it's probably not great.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I'm not the person to ask that question.
Sounds good. Is it so like if I turn my tap water on, it's coming out of that?
It's coming out in lower doses than in a bottled water would, but yes, it's likely in your tap water as well. You can get a water filter that will remove microplastics, and I highly recommend those. They're like $40 to put on your sink, because there's other things in our water now too, like PFAS, forever chemicals. It's in pretty much all water. The problem is any pollution that we put in the atmosphere eventually comes back to us through our water. Water is life. So we really need to step up and protect our oceans, protect our water systems, because we're ending up drinking this stuff.
Yeah. I want to like, my researcher gave me some statistics I want to throw out, but globally, 1 million single-use plastic bottles are bought every minute, and less than a third will be recycled. Humans have produced 8.3 billion metric tons of plastic since 1950.
Yep.
Average...
yeah. Can I add to that?
Yeah, please do.
8.3 billion. That's 18.3 trillion pounds of plastic have been produced since 1950. More than half of that was produced since 2004. So this problem is increasing exponentially. We're putting out more and more plastic every year, and adding to that non-biodegradable load, adding to our oceans. And the more we add, the bigger the microplastic load gets. So we really got to stop putting plastic out, because as I said, 40% of what's being made is single use, like for water bottles and things like that.
Oh, wait, water bottles? Those aren't recyclable?
They're recyclable, but it's a single-use water bottle.
Oh, and like I said, less than a third will be recycled anyway.
Yeah, and less than a third, yeah. Of that 18.3 trillion pounds of plastic that's been produced, less than 9% has ever been or ever will be recycled. 12% has been incinerated, and the rest is either in the environment or landfills. And the issue is we cannot recycle our way out of this problem. Recycling is an industry solution, and it's kind of a myth as far as plastic goes. I'm a big proponent of recycling. Tin, glass, cardboard, all those things can be recycled almost indefinitely. But plastic is only downcycled. Every time you recycle plastic, it degrades it a little bit. And so recycling plastic only postpones its eventual disposal. And the problem with recycling PET, which is what water bottles like Coke bottles are made out of, is that they're usually recycled into fabric for carpets, fleece, things like that. And plastic carpet contributes to the indoor microplastic dust. So like when you abrade or when you have an abrasion of the carpet, it releases microplastic into your air. When you wash something that has fleece in it, it releases millions of microplastics into the water with every wash. So this downcycling is also contributing to the microplastic pollution, and it's only delaying the inevitable disposal of the plastic.
Wow, because I saw that approach with like gloves and some of the stuff you just mentioned. I know like Adidas, they're doing a whole recycled plastic shoe, but even that's like, you say that's not really a good solution.
I mean, we have to do something with the plastic waste that we have, but we have to think carefully about what we're going to do. There are, for example, there are filters now that you can add to washing machines that catch the microplastic before it gets out into the waterways. But again, I will say that recycling plastic is a false solution. It's been an abysmal failure in the US, especially because we don't sort our plastic, and only 1 in 2 plastic is actually recyclable. And people put, mixed plastic film, all kinds of things in their curbside recycling. Like you said, you put all the plastic in your recycling. Only 1 in 2 is generally accepted. Some communities accept number 5 plastics, and they get contaminated. They They can't sort them. Plastic bags that wind up in the recycling jam the equipment at recycling centers. And then they just wind up going to landfills anyway, sometimes because it's too expensive or there's no market for the recycled plastic material.
Forgot if it was a TED talk or maybe like I forgot where I saw it, but I remember seeing that. I guess I contribute to the problem. Like I said, I just recycle all the plastic, but I heard people who over try to recycle plastic make it worse because there's either like food or something mixed in with it or too much bad that they end up just taking the whole pile and throwing it straight to the trash instead of recycling the good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we call that wish cycling.
I always got a term.
Yeah, wish cycling, you put it in the bin and you hope that you've done your duty. But recycling has been a well done PR campaign by the oil and gas industry to prolong our dependence on fossil fuels, to keep plastic being the cheapest material on the market. And recycling was a way to lift the guilt from consumers, to make them feel like because they were putting the plastic in the recycling bin that the problem was being solved or being dealt with. But what the consumer didn't see is that most of that plastic, didn't get recycled. And in the meantime, upstream, they were building more ethane crackers as the U.S. fracking industry built out to make more plastic. And so municipal waste systems just can't handle this accumulation of non-biodegradable material, and they were becoming overwhelmed. And the taxpayers didn't realize that they were actually paying to dispose of the plastic industry's waste.
And also, didn't didn't they find out about climate change and then keep it hidden for years?
Yeah, there's a memo where they had an expert. I don't have it in front of me. You could Google it though. It's from the 80s. But I mean, I've read the memo and it's pretty damning.
I feel like two things. One, when I get gasoline, I don't go to ExxonMobil, so I'm making a difference, even though I'm not at all because they're making billions. And two, I like to tell myself I'm making a difference. But two, well, I feel like if they figured out that they're causing this climate change issue, they should have used that to invest in, like, say, solar panels or something like that. And then they could have been ahead of the market because eventually we have to either turn green or everything dies. So they should have taken that business wise and could have been the next Tesla.
Yeah, I can't say what the market what the motivation there was, except that it's been really profitable for them. And they have greenwashed us and, perpetuated their industry against all logic, reason, against life and humanity. And it's still happening. There have been 334 new petrochemical plants proposed since 2010, and a lot of those are still nearing completion. They're in construction or they're in the permitting phase. An example would be the Shell ethane cracker that's in Pennsylvania. It's 70% complete. Construction was delayed because of coronavirus. So it was supposed to come online last year. It's now coming online in 2022. And that facility, once it's built, will put out 1.8 million tons of virgin polyethylene pellets every year. And PTT GC Global, is Global Chemical, it's a Thailand-based company, is thinking about building an ethane cracker in Belmont County, Ohio, and Exxon is also thinking about building an ethane cracker in that area. So the petrochemical build out is still happening, contrary to all of the evidence that if we do not stop using fossil fuels and stop polluting the planet, like, we are going to experience a mass extinction. This is this is a scientifically agreed upon existential threat. We're talking, greater than 97% extinction of species if we don't stop polluting the air. And they're going to do everything they can to delay that. I don't know why, because it affects everybody.
Yeah, but they make more money if they don't.
If they don't pollute the air,
if they don't worry about it, and they just keep the business going.
I don't know. We could get into the philosophy of it. It's more than just one person in a corporation. It's sort of like a super organism, and it's in a momentum that's in the wrong direction, and they've got a lot on their side. Unfortunately, they've got tons of money to throw at it, endless resources, almost seemingly endless political resources. They can pay a full-time PR team to fight local, ragtag organizations that are trying to stop climate change. And so it's the big company against communities like Belmont County that don't want an ethane cracker plant built. Well, some of them don't, and some of them might. I can't speak for Belmont County, but communities that try to organize against petrochemical facilities, they're not being paid to try and do this, to save their community, their landscape, the planet. They're having to sacrifice hours and hours of time from their families, from their lives, and go through this stressful, long, drawn-out fights that all too often they can't win because of the political clout of the oil and gas industry. So that may sound dark and dreary, but there is hope, and there is something that you can do, because there's legislation, federal legislation called the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act that is being reintroduced in March. It was introduced last year with, I believe, 94 co-sponsors. And this act would do a lot to, what's the word? It's on the tip of my tongue. To meaningfully, the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act would do a lot to meaningfully address plastic pollution, starting with suspending new plastic production permits. So if you want to do something, read about this bill and then call your congressman's office and request a meeting and say, get 10 of your friends together and request a meeting with your congressperson and say, I want to talk to you about plastic pollution and why it's really important that you co-sponsor this bill and get this bill passed. And then call your senator and do the same thing, both of your senators.
So this is a bill that would have an actual impact against these companies or for just the environment in general, and just have as many people as we can talk to our senators or House members or whatever to motivate them to enact it. Yeah.
Read about it. One thing that it would do is it would require extended producer responsibility, which is a law that many European countries have, but we don't have here, where if you produce plastic, you have to pay to recycle it or remove it or whatever, because right now that's an externalized cost that communities pay for. The plastic companies don't pay for that. And that's a reason that plastic is so cheap. It's a hidden cost. It would require minimum recycled content. It would require source reduction and phase out certain single-use plastics. It'll develop standardized recycling and composting labels. And it'll prevent our plastic waste from being shipped to countries that can't manage it. This is another thing about plastic that not a lot of people know about, is that when you put your plastic in the recycling, up until 2017, most of it was being shipped to China, actually. And it was being shipped to coastal countries that had a market in recycling or couldn't resist not resist, I don't know, couldn't prevent the waste from being shipped there. And, you often hear that a lot of the plastic in the ocean is coming from these South Asian countries, is coming from the rivers where they don't manage their waste or whatever. Actually, a lot of that waste came from the US.
We just shipped it over there. And China has now enacted their one sword policy that says that they will no longer accept contaminated plastic, because most of the plastic we were shipping there had no value. It wasn't like the valuable quote unquote PET. It was like plastic film. It's contaminated. It had garbage in it, and we were just like out of sight, out of mind. But China no longer accepts it, and now there's an international agreement called the I can't remember what it was called. But now that China is no longer accepting our plastic waste, we're having to figure out what to do with it here. And this is only a couple of years now that we're into this, but it's starting to accumulate in the US. And so we got to figure out what to do with it. And my fear is that communities are going to turn to incinerating it instead of source reduction. And that would be an absolute disaster for our air quality. When you burn plastic, you get some of the most toxic emissions that we know of, and that includes dioxins and furans. Just a small amount of these toxins can cause life-changing systemic health problems. So imagine that, if we're producing 1.6 million tons of virgin plastic times however many ethane crackers there are in the US, and pumping that into our communities, and then we have to turn to burning it or landfilling it, it's an environmental disaster. So it's either option A, we burn it, and then that just spreads everywhere, so then everyone's inhaling it. B, leave in a landfill where it like grows and overflows, because how long does it take to biodegrade? Like thousands of years or something?
I've heard 400 years. I've heard more than 1,000 years.
I have 500 to 1,000 right here. That's convenient. But yeah.
It doesn't really biodegrade. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces.
Oh yeah, to degrade. I forgot to read that word. But yeah, so either that or just, like you said, goes into the ocean, where I saw a picture on the internet the other day where it's a carcass of a bird. You just see the skeleton and like the feathers, and nothing but just like plastic and bottles and where its stomach used to be.
Yeah, it was probably an albatross. That's really sad, but birds mistake plastic for food, and this is really, really tragic. They eat the plastic, and then this is how whales die too. They no longer have room in their stomach for actual food, and they slowly starve to death. And then they feed it to their chicks, and their chicks starve to death. This is what we're doing to the planet, and this is going to come back to us eventually.
As a contribution of that and like pollution, are we in the greatest extinction event ever? Like, didn't 52% bunch of animals already die off for good? We've
increased the rate of extinction by 1,000 times what it was before the Industrial Revolution. Maybe even, wait, don't quote me on that. We've increased extinction 1,000 times the normal rate, and we're losing about 100 species every day. Most of that from loss of habitat, but also from plastic choking wildlife.
So also sea turtles, they think plastic bags are jellyfish, so they'll try to eat those too.
Yep. This is why we need to ban plastic bags. They're one of the most ubiquitous forms of plastic pollution there is.
What about I did an episode a while ago on hemp plastic. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we need to invest more in plastic alternatives that are truly biodegradable. You got to be careful not to fall for bioplastics. There's some plastic that's made from corn or like bio-based carbon, but the end result is the same plastic. What you need is like a truly biodegradable, compostable plastic. And we're just not there yet with the technology. But we could be if we invested our resources in that instead of building multi-billion-dollar cracker plants.
Because yeah, the way I saw hemp plastic was it's supposed to be like stronger than regular plastic, and it's supposed to like biodegrade completely after like I don't know the number, but not nearly. I mean, like close to as long as plastic. I want to say completely biodegrades after like 500 years as a maximum. Like a guess. Don't think it's higher than that. So it just needs to be more invested in, or it's just not mainstream enough, or
It's tough. I mean, plastic is the cheapest packing material on the market. And if you're trying to, make it as a small business or as any business or trying to maximize your margins, you're going to go with that cheaper plastic packaging. But I sincerely think that eventually we will stop being so wasteful with how much single-use plastic we make. So we're going to need alternatives. And hopefully, if that's true about the hemp plastic, that technology will be waiting in the wings to kind of step in and be available.
Gotcha. So I'm assuming with the bill as an example, but where does your organization step in? Because again, National Organizing Director for Beyond Plastic. So what does Beyond Plastic plan to do? What's the end goal?
So we educate and advocate, and it starts with educating people on just how bad plastic pollution is. I mean, in a single generation, we've produced let me put it this way. There are people alive today who knew a world before single-use plastic, who knew a world before an economy that relied on plastic and petrochemicals. So we try to teach people that this isn't normal, the amount of plastic packaging. This isn't normal. It shouldn't be normal, the plastic that you see littering in the environment, and that there's something that you can do about it. So my role is to help organize people to support legislation that will rein in plastic pollution, like the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, but also more local things that you can do, like getting a local bag ban, a local straw ban, teaching people how to protect themselves from ingesting microplastic, teaching people about all the things that are made of plastic that you didn't even know was made of plastic. But also, Judith, our president, Judith Enck, is an environmental policy expert. So she can read bills and know exactly what is missing from a bill that needs to make it stronger. She can provide sample bills for other people to take into their communities. And if you look on our website, beyondplastic.org, you will see a sample Beyond Plastic bill that you can take to your county legislature or your town board or your city council and, tell your council person, I want you to co-sponsor this bill. And the bill itself would ban single-use plastic straws, plastic bags, polystyrene takeout containers, and it would ban the release of balloons, and it also bans plastic stirrers and plastic coffee splash guards. So if you can take this bill that we've already written for you, and we've gotten it implemented in New York State, Vermont, and New Jersey, take that to your councilperson, say, I want you to co-sponsor this bill. Plastic pollution is out of control in our community, and it's affecting our health and our wildlife. And your councilperson hopefully will say, absolutely, I will co-sponsor this bill, and I'll introduce it into the legislature or the city council or the town board. And then you're on track to get single-use plastic banned in your community if you can get your representative to co-sponsor it or to sponsor it. And then all you have to do is build some community effort, community people power, I like to call it, and get more people on board, have them call their representative and say, hey, there's this bill, it's been introduced, I want you to co-sponsor it. And then get enough people, get your city council to vote on it, if you have enough co-sponsors, hopefully, and then they will enact it. And then, it's a long road. It took a couple of years to get it passed. It's passed in the city that I live in, Troy, New York. We have the full ban. But this is what people can do. So don't feel powerless. Don't feel like if recycling's not working, there's nothing you can do. You got to get politically involved and teach yourself about the issue and why your representative needs to address it and why they have the responsibility and the duty to address it.
Gotcha. I guess one of my concerns, though, is you mentioned earlier on, say, like recycling, it's good to do, but not really. It doesn't contribute as much as we believe it should. Like the single-use plastic is the real issue. And then banning these plastic straws and plastic bags, is that another just sort of, it's a small step and not really doing anything? Is that actually contributing to the overall plastic issue that was the single plastic that these companies are giving out everywhere?
Well, it's sorry, I said it bans straws, but it's actually straws upon request, because there are certain ADA requirements and some people do need straws, but it does do something. And let me tell you why. So I mentioned earlier that the Marcellus Shale Basin and the Utica Basin is being eyed by petrochemical companies to build new plastic facilities, new ethane cracker plants, and proposing a petrochemical hub, a new cancer alley along the Ohio River. And if you read the market reports from Reuters Downstream, Google this, it's called Reuters Downstream, and it has internal market reports for the petrochemical industry that are publicly available. They talk about this potential petrochemical hub. And one of the big reasons that it's so mouthwatering is because of its proximity to markets. So if you ban single-use plastic, you're decreasing the market for single-use plastics. And you're decreasing the overall market for plastic producers. Because we've got plenty of plastic. We don't need more plastic. We've got a glut of plastic. But if they can increase the market for plastic, then they can justify making more. So by banning plastic bags and straws, you're significantly reducing that single-use plastic share of the market, which is 40%. And, I can't say for sure, but maybe that could be the tipping point where the company is like, I don't think this is going to be the right investment for us. Let's not build a methane cracker.
Gotcha. And yeah, like you said, more than enough plastic. I remember hearing we went through the Bronze Age, the Silver Age, and now we're kind of in the plastic age, literally.
We are. I mean, it's already in, I'm not a geologist, but what's the rock beneath the soil? It's like, if you were to archaeologically uncover the soil, the plastic is like bound in the sediment. I'm not a geologist. I don't know the right word for it, but we've definitely left our mark.
It's like the microplastic house, like everywhere. It's literally even in our soil.
Oh, it's in our soil. Yeah, 100%. And studies have shown that it disrupts the soil's microbiome because everywhere that plastic winds up, because it doesn't degrade, it disrupts the normal microbiome. In the ocean, it displaces like the phytoplankton that fish feed on. And it can colonize bacteria, and then that bacteria travels wherever the microplastic goes. So you get bacteria that shouldn't be there. But it is in our soil. It's in our waterways. It's everywhere.
I remember hearing, I feel like a lot of people have heard this too, but isn't there an island the size of Texas? I think Texas out in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, they called it an island or the 5 Gyres, Gyres, but that's inaccurate because plastic in the ocean is more like a smog. As it breaks down, it sinks to the bottom, so it's more distributed throughout the throughout the water. It does kind of collect in these gears, but yeah, it's more accurate to think of it as like smog over LA or something like that.
Okay. And also, while scrolling through the research I was given again, I was actually really surprised. The United States are the most produced plastic waste in the country in the world. 105 kilograms per person per year.
Yep.
UK, that's second with 99. Wow. And worst plastic polluters in 2020, like company Coca-Cola, number of countries in which plastic waste was found and pieces of waste recorded. 51 for Coca-Cola, PepsiCo 43, Nestle 37. Plastics like number, Coca-Cola was 13,834, which is that in units? I don't know. That part looks kind of odd.
Well, communities in these coastal countries, they do what's called a brand audit. So they collect plastic waste on their beaches and then they sort it by brand. And Coca-Cola has been found to be the most polluting brand in the world for 3 years straight. Coke produces 3 million tons of plastic packaging every year.
Gotcha. I know Coors Light, I mean, it's still early on, but they want to do fish food as the thing that holds their beer cans, like when you get a 6-pack.
That's a creative solution. I mean, Coke does offer its product in cans and aluminum cans are made of 70% recycled material already, and you can recycle them again. So I know we don't have an infinite supply of aluminum in the world, but there's already an alternative to plastic bottles out there.
Gotcha. And what about my researcher showed me the bottle bill. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of it. It's part of the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, and it's a part of extended producer responsibility where, you know, people pay a deposit, like 5 cents or 10 cents on each plastic bottle they buy, and they get that deposit back when they return the bottle. And it exponentially improves recycling rates and sorting of the recyclables.
In a glass bottle in this case?
Yeah, some glass bottles are accepted, but
because it is plastic, if you keep reusing it, doesn't that just contribute more microplastic to it?
Yeah, you don't want to reuse your single-use plastic bottles. It's not just the microplastic, it's the chemicals that are added to plastic. Plastic is up to 7% chemicals by weight, and these are things that like soften it or make it moldable, pliable. Like BPA is a very well-known one. Phthalates are another one. And these chemicals can be endocrine disruptors. They can be stored in your fat cells. They cause all kinds of problems that aren't, some are well studied, but they leach into your food. So don't reuse your plastic bottles for sure. And don't heat your bottles. Like if you have a plastic water bottle in the car and it's been sitting there for a few days in the hot sun, don't drink that water.
Yeah, I heard that's one of the worst things you can do.
Guilty of it as a kid, but I didn't know better. And
Same.
So, you know, little kids, they get affected more by this because they are more at risk of exposure because they don't know, and 2, little kids put all kinds of things in their mouths. So
yeah, I remember playing baseball or like outdoor basketball, leaving my bottle in the sun for like 3 hours or something, 5 hours. At the end of the day, I'd come back and just drink from it, even though it was sweltering hot, like it was nothing.
Oh, sorry. My engineer's here and she's signaling to me.
Okay, sounds good, because I know you have to leave in 5 minutes. I'm gonna just say too, for the audience, like if we don't know the side effects, so also, I mean, some of those coatings you said, or even the microplastic, who knows? Even red dye can give you ADD as a kid, so who knows what like microplastics could do?
I mean, it's been found in placentas, and you know, as the fetus or the baby is developing, it's being fed microplastics, and who knows what's going on. Who knows if microplastics are accumulating in our body the same way they accumulate in the oceans, because we're 70% water. And I said it earlier in the show, but water is life, and we're made of it, and it circulates in our body too. What's circulating in the ocean is circulating inside of us. And who knows if it can cross the blood-brain barrier, or yeah, the blood-brain barrier, and accumulate in our brains or in our thyroid glands or our kidneys. You got to know this and protect yourself. And we didn't even get into the environmental justice impacts of plastic, because the people who live in these communities where plastic is being produced are being exposed at hundreds of times higher rates to these chemicals than the average US person is. And I don't know if you've been following like what's going on with the Keystone XL pipeline fight, the DAPL fight, the Line 3 pipeline fight. These petrochemical infrastructure facilities, pipelines, storage facilities, ethane crackers, refineries, they're almost always cited in communities that don't have a lot of political clout. So we're talking poor communities, BIPOC communities, and indigenous communities. And that's environmental injustice. They don't have the power, the political power to fight back. You know, they're fighting against environmental racism, basically, trying to protect their communities, their land, their water. And it's something that needs to be addressed through national legislation and regulation. There's a few environmental justice federal bills out there, but we really need to do more to protect these communities and make reparations.
Your radio station time is just about up, so sadly can't go into that right now. Is there any quick final message you want to tell the audience?
I would say don't feel hopeless, because there's something that you can do, and educate yourself about plastic and all the different things that go with it, and be on the alert for greenwashing solutions. Learn what these terms mean, and then get a meeting with your federal representatives, your congressperson, your senators, and invite 10 of your friends on a Zoom call with them and get them to support the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act.
Sounds good. For the audience, this was Alexis Goldsmith, National Organizing Director for Beyond Plastic. Again, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Bill.
And for the audience, as always, deuces.
This has been The Way Podcast. If you want to know more about The Way Podcast, go to podcasttheway.com.